Welcome. And this webinar is aimed to help you learn a lot more about community businesses. Some of you may be well versed because you're involved with one, but generally a community business is something that is a social enterprise and it's accountable to its community. A lot of community businesses have an actual asset like a premises, which you'll hear more about. And like other social enterprises, its profit has to go back to impacting the local community that it serves. So this community is helping you to understand a bit more about it, appreciate the importance of who you need to have involved, and hear a bit more about the crowdfunding side, how you actually get to the point of launching something. And as I mentioned, if you've got any questions, please put it in the chat and Robert and Alex will answer them as we go. So Robert is a very experienced social entrepreneur. He's also a trustee at a charity and he's also an author. I know he's writing a book at the moment, which he'll tell you about. And as a Quaker, he's naturally motivated to challenge inequality wherever he sees it. Alex is new to Norfolk. He's passionate about pubs and community businesses, and he's recently been involved with that. He'll explain to you how it's tough and rewarding, has a lot of potential. And Alex also has experience in the social investment field in his previous work. So now I'll hand over to you, Robert, and let me know when you want me to turn the screen off.
Okay, thank you. So I'll talk you through the walled garden community shop at Little Plumstead. Please interrupt with questions if you want to, or I'll just sort of ramble on. The picture is of me with a pair of scissors cutting a piece of string on the 17th of October, which is when the shop officially opened. It's on Little Plumstead, the site of the former Little Plumstead Hospital, which was an asylum. So it was, then it was derelict for years, and now it's being developed with 300 houses. And interestingly, the 300 houses, but no shop nearby. For me, it's a project that one thing led to another. So I met somebody who worked at the medium secure unit, the Broadland Clinic on the site, which is the last remaining mental health unit there. And I kind of persuaded them to invite me for a visit. So I had a visit around the unit, found out that the biggest problem they had there was work experience for the service users as they're preparing to leave. And so looking out the windows, I said, what if there's a shop in this shop here that people here could use as a shop and the people in your unit could go and do work experience there forever? And kind of that was the starting point, and it led from there really. So I suppose my first point is that look for unusual partnerships. So you wouldn't expect a mental health trust and a rural community to partner to create a community shop, but that's exactly what happened. I live 20 minutes away from the site, so it had to be community led by people who are on site, who are there, who live there, and that's really important. So we recruited a local steering group and they took ownership. And the steering group was made up of people that live at Plumstead and also of staff at the Broadland Clinic. There was a community share issue. It wasn't hugely successful. I learned some lessons there about when to listen and when to push, but we did raise £250,000. And we had a modular shop built, which was far cheaper than having a conventional build, but every bit as exciting. And it was really rather nice to go there on the opening day and sit in the cafe drinking coffee and just see it all happening. It was amazing. Just a last point on the modular shop. So it was built by a company in Peterborough, and the man who has the company in Peterborough is the guy who made me redundant 30 years ago. So the other sort of top tip is don't lose touch with people, even if they piss you off in the past, because they could be really useful in the future. And he has been useful in building this for me. So for the next slide, there's an easy way and a hard way to do community enterprise. And I just think the easy way is to do what's been done before. And the Plunkett Foundation, whose website is on the last slide, have a really useful kind of template you can follow of community consultation, demonstrating need, how to set the shop up, the fact that you have a paid member of staff and volunteers running the shop. And so there are 320 odd community shops around the UK, and you can learn from all the mistakes that they've made and do all the good stuff with your own. So that means that they have like a 99% chance of success, and they're already doing really well. Stakeholder management is really important. There are the obvious ones like the parish council, which is hard work, the district council that we're useful but not that helpful. People that live there, the Mental Health Trust, and lots of other people who we got involved with along the way. So the more stakeholders and more involved they are, the better. And that, of course, helps when it comes to fundraising. They have a mix of local suppliers and the usual cash and carry, and they had this big debate about, do we sell fags and booze? But when you walk in the door now, the first thing you see is the off license, and the second thing you see is the cafe, and the fags are under the counter. So it's kind of there. So I think the message there is you have to sell what people will buy if you want a shop to be viable. So it has a social purpose as a community resource, but it actually has to have what people want to buy. It has the benefit also of being sitting between the church and the school, and that is interesting because young mums drop their kids off at school and go for a coffee and cake on the way back home afterwards, and that's really quite useful. It sits in a redundant walled garden, and the walled garden is going to be restored, and that again will provide lots of work experience for service users at the Broadland Clinic, and that's really quite useful too. So the grow stuff that can sell in the shop, and also becomes an open space in a housing development where there is open space, but it's just kind of like space, and there you've got flowers, places to sit, drink coffee. It becomes a place to go, a destination. And it's becoming a place where people go and meet, eat, and just share good ideas. It's become the heart of the community straight away. So the next slide is the lessons I learned along the way. And first thing is you can't push volunteers. I learned this years ago working with a village in West Norfolk that I like things to happen quickly, but you have to go at the speed of the people that are going to make it happen on the ground. You can't push people. Somebody said to me once, it's okay for you, Robert, to have these ideas about doing this very quickly, but I have to live here. I have to live with these people. So you have to all of these projects develop a momentum, and you just have to go with it. You also have to confront people's fears head on. So the medium secure unit has people that often have learning disability, usually have offenders, are often referred by the criminal justice system. And so there's a perception that they're all sort of paedophiles that are going to leap out and attack the children. And we had to go to great lengths to reassure the head teacher at the school that that wasn't the case. The vicar, who I thought would be an ally, we had to work on her as well. And eventually we got them on board, and that was really important. And actually that was almost as important as the project itself, because it meant that there's greater tolerance and understanding in that community of people in the secure unit. I think there's something about expecting the unexpected and not being surprised when it happens. So somebody who had been at the original Plumstead Hospital, which was a place where people with learning disability went and were kind of there, lived there basically as like a community, died and left the trust a legacy, because they'd had legacy left to them, and that rolled over into the project and just made all the difference at the end of the fundraising. So we didn't expect to get a legacy, but we did, and that was really useful. We also had capital investment for the Mental Health Trust, because they could see the impact the project would have on their service users, and that was important as well. As I said, don't try and reinvent the wheel. There's always somebody doing it already, and just copy what they're doing and do it that bit better. And I think there's also something about, once you've been through these hard learning curves, it's about helping other people who are coming along the road behind you. And just on crowdfunding, I mean, I'm a big fan of crowdfunding, and there was crowdfunding involved with this, but the steering group wanted to use a different platform to what I suggested. They wanted to do it in a slightly different way to the way I was suggesting, and I went with them, and it didn't work as well as it could have done, and we had to go at it another way later. So I think sometimes, even if you're leading a project and you're involving other people, you do have to, and you're confident of your ground, you do have to stand it and say, actually, no, we've got to do it this way. So I think that sort of summarizes where it is. So it started with a question in a medium secure unit, and it's now a thriving community business. And I think it's the point of difference with the grant makers. Certainly we got grants from various places. The thing that tipped the balance was the fact that it was not just a community shop. It's not just providing a place for people in the village to meet and eat and buy things. It was providing work experience for vulnerable adults in the secure unit. And so a partnership between the obvious and the unexpected in this case has really worked, and I think it could work perhaps for other projects too. Perhaps now a good time to hand over to Alex.
Great, thanks, Rob. So slightly different story, and like in the introduction, I'm fairly new to Norfolk. Gressenhall is a little village and idyllic in every way, except when I moved here a couple of years ago, there wasn't a pub or an open pub, but there has been one there at the Swan since 1790, and I had a lot of conversations understanding if people were in a similar boat to me, and recognized the importance that a pub has to a village. So just for context, and just in terms of the social impact of what I hope that the Swan would do when it reopens. So we've crowdfunded, but we don't expect to open until August next year. So we're not yet fully commercial and trading. So it'll be professionally run, but it's community owned. We're a village with a lot of single dwellers living on their own, and I think that pubs can play a really important part in crucial social interactions, improving the cohesion of the community and reducing social isolation. So there's loads of volunteer participation opportunities, learning evenings, and we've partnered with a rural mental health hub to make us do this really well, and all of the designs are going to be dementia friendly. So I think one of the big things for us to overcome was how could a tired pub, how could you make people believe that it had an exciting future? So I think what we did first was we identified the people that really believed in what we were trying to do, created a small dynamic team, and then we were really looking to create a vision. And I think this slide kind of captures it. So we did a lot of the traditional things, like Robert said, in terms of not reinventing the wheel. Work through the Plunkett tick list of community consultation, and we did loads of surveys, but we tried to go a little bit further than that, because we knew we had a particularly sticky situation with a very tired looking building that hadn't run successfully for a number of years. So as you can see on this slide, we did a mock-up using some tech wizards in our community to really get people excited about what the pub could be in the future, to get people behind it. Sometimes, and particularly myself included, I can't necessarily see the potential in everything, but I think with a little bit of creativity applied, it can really bring it to light. And I think when people saw this, it was really motivating and got people excited, got that sort of buzz in the village as to what it could be, and that was the kind of groundswell of support that really got everything going. And you can see Laura and Freddie in the right hand photo. We then took this idea of engagement and community feedback a little bit further, and we used virtual reality to map out the layout of the internal part of the pub, and we gave people a tour through a headset. It's quite disorientating, but a really exciting way, and I think it shows the potential of technology in terms of how we can get feedback and engage people in the early parts of a community business project. Won't necessarily always be applicable, but I think it was another real exciting sort of buzz platform for us. If we could just go to the next slide, please. So we crowdfunded over this summer. So we launched on the 20th of August, and the share offer closed at the end of September. So we weren't in full lockdown, but I think we are probably fairly restricted in what we could do in terms of the traditional launch events. So we had to go about things a little bit differently, but we could still do some of the things that do some of the basics really well. So you can see our chief leafleter, Orla, who did a fantastic job amongst an army of volunteers. you know, doing the door-to-door leafleting, making sure everybody knew exactly what was happening and why it was really important. And we complemented this, of course, with lots of digital media. I think it's the direction of travel that speaking with your community electronically is becoming very much part of the way things are done, and I think it's exacerbated by restrictions. So we did have a really big presence on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and we had a good website built. But I still think that a little bit of physical signage and getting people excited about things is still really important. And you can see on the right hand side, we had the very sort of typical thermometer that we adapted into a Swan with the fundraising target going up, and it really created a energy throughout the village just seeing what the weekly update was. So yeah, we were absolutely blown away. We raised £260,000 in 5 weeks from 425 stakeholders, and we were also able to tap into a more than a pub loan and grant package of £100,000. So we've now got £350,000 of capital to acquire and completely reinvigorate the pub. So if we could just go to the next slide. I've just got a summary of some of the learning similar to Robert. And there's a blog that, if this can get circulated afterwards, there's a little bit more context around these summary bullets. But I think overriding reflection from our steering group is it's extremely hard work. A lot of us had day jobs, and there's no getting around the planning and doing stuff to a really high standard. Takes time, it takes commitment, and I think it's just working out who's there to do that and who's got the capacity. So I think that was something that we did reasonably well, but I just couldn't state it further enough if you're kind of thinking of doing crowdfunding yourself. Secondly, pull in the experts. I think what you want from a steering group, if you're very early stage, is that you want people that are committed, but you're not necessarily going to be all singing and all dancing in every kind of facet and every skill set that you require. So we were able to pull in a marketing expert to help in the latter part of the campaign, and just gave us that structure that really reaped rewards later on. So I think working out the strengths, weaknesses and gaps that are in your team and planning how you can fill them is really, really important. Third one, we had to raise a lot of money. Pubs and shops like the Walled Garden and like the Swan are not cheap assets. There are community businesses that can be set up and crowdfunded much more inexpensively, but there's a difficult reality. We didn't have any legacy money to kind of draw on, and so we are really looking for best part of £250,000 from the village and nearby surrounding areas. So whilst we made it really accessible and set a very inclusive minimum share investment of £50 following the kind of Plunkett principles, there's a reality that you need some people to be able to put in larger amounts, and kind of over the build up, we spent a lot of time having those difficult conversations, working out and trying to get people to commit through kind of a pledging exercise to that, so we could be really confident. And then I think what converted our share offer into a successful one was making those people that had pledged put their money in very early, such that we could report big steps of progress in the first 24 hours, first week, and that sort of really unleashes lots of extra support and just keeps building the momentum. And just lastly, goes without saying, but communicating both within your steering group and to your prospective investors and all the other interested parties like the media is just really important. We had somebody to guide us a little bit, but it just can't be said enough, really. I think being really clear with everybody about what you're trying to achieve is a prerequisite for success. And I'm kind of pleased that we managed to do reasonably well out of it as a result. So I think that covers my set. If I can pass it back to Jane.
Yep, thank you, Alex. I'll just show the last slide as well before we get on to chatting and sharing experiences. So you've heard Robert and Alex refer to Plunkett Foundation. You've got a really good outline of sort of steps you need to go through and how to plan things out. We've got some other links here who are real experts in community businesses, co-op, power to change. Have a look on Robert's website to see his experience and other things he's involved with. Crowdfunder, if you're not sure where to start with a crowdfunding campaign, have a look at their website. On our website, we've got sort of general support for social enterprises, but also covers community businesses and a whole range of different funding sources that you can have a look at, or just get in touch with me directly. And Good Finance as well, who have access to a range of different funding pots. I'll stop screen sharing now. Stop share. And we can open it out if anyone wants to either talk about a community business they're involved with or want to ask some questions. The open floor now for anyone who wants to ask anything. Any questions? Oh, hello. If you go for, I've just got RE for your name.
Rhiannon.
Rhiannon, hi Rhiannon, if you want to go first.
Yeah, I was curious, Robert, you talked about the concept of when to listen and when to push, and you're really good at summarising things into phrases. I really love that. But were you referring to when you're involving a steering group and when you're getting feedback? Because a lot of us, because we're interested in social impact, we want to be able to be meeting people's needs, and sometimes when you get feedback that can take you in a direction that's really amazing, and then other times because we're just human and we're learning, that can take us into a direction which leads to a dead end, and we pivot and we turn and we look at other options. But I'm just really curious about your when to listen and when to push, and what sort of context you need that in.
Yeah, that's quite difficult. It's quite difficult. So I guess an example is the crowdfunding. I'd used Crowdfunder UK before. They're kind of well connected with Power to Change, a big grant maker. There's a whole methodology around community share issues and about setting minimum payment way and what the incentives are to get larger payments. But the village were really keen to pay lower fee. They felt that it would cost them less to use a different platform. And I can't let them do it, as I shouldn't have done. I should have pushed them to do what I knew was going to work, and work for other people. I think sometimes when you've got the two things I guess I've done that help with people that are doubting. One is, particularly with cancer, I was stuck in a car, I've driven them some other leads and said, look, here's one that someone's already doing. So Alex had had that image of what the pub could look like. I've actually put people in the car and driven them to one that somebody's already running, so they can see and talk to people. And the other thing is sometimes if you need an ally, so get somebody to come in as quote expert and can deliver the message on your behalf. That can be quite useful. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. You're talking about when to trust your gut and when to really follow something and get maybe more information, and when to.
Yeah, I think sometimes if you've done it before, I've been involved with several of these things now, that you kind of know what's going to work and what isn't. And there's a fine line between appearing to be sort of a bloody expert and a know-all, and actually having that experience.
Thanks, Robert.
It's just a fine line to tread, but it works.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Yeah, Susan had a question, I think, next.
Good morning. I'm joining you. I'm not actually in the east of England. I'm southeast, but Alex very kindly invited me because we'd heard about his project. I wanted to ask a question around the fundraising idea. So we're running a share sale at the moment, which is doing really well. We're saving our local pub. But on the other side of the coin, there are people that don't want to be shareholders and want to make donations potentially to your campaign, etc. And I've set up a crowdfunding page, but there's this kind of balance between when you push the shares and when you might drop in the donations, because actually, you know, from the village perspective, we want people to be shareholders and invested in the future of the pub. But actually, we also want that other money to come in that is probably sitting out there. So did either of you use both schemes, and at which point did you launch them?
I'm happy to go first on that. So we planned to bring donations in later on. I think we're probably in the same boat as you. We're really fortunate that we didn't need to draw on it in the end, because I think the share offer got up a real head of steam. I was quite reluctant to do, you know, I think donations really have their place, but I was concerned with the messaging of having two things running in parallel. And I think that we were seeking to have a really wide membership base, and a low minimum investment of £50 was a clear and single ask. And I think I was slightly worried that donations was a different way to go about it, that just potentially creates confusion and might have raised slightly less money, because I guess you can just get people investing different amounts. And I think it was just easy in my mind to simplify and just say, you know, we're investing in our village's future. You know, the investment is our first solution that's actually going to get us at least 90% of the way. I don't know, that there may be some local circumstances in your area where you believe that there's some larger donations that are going to make up a significant proportion of the capital you need. But I think in most part it's more ancillary, and it's an extra rather than a sort of key driver of converting your share offer into a successful one that's got enough funding. So we didn't go with it. I guess I would acknowledge that we've been very clear from the start that people can play roles in different ways, and there are still people that weren't able to invest in our share offer for a number of reasons. And I think it's still really important that you make it clear that people can add value to the project in lots of different ways. So if people can't invest or donate, if that's the way you choose to go, that they can also sort of contribute with their time, you know, so they could go and leaflet around and make sure that people are aware. You know, like I said, it takes an awful lot of time, and I think just working out how you can unlock people's talents and money is a kind of constant juggling act. So I don't think there's necessarily kind of one answer, but it's just working out what's right for your local situation.
I think that another point there is that, and I kind of agree with what Alex says about shares being important and setting the bar quite low so that you can become a shareholder for, say, 50 quid. The more shareholders you get early on in a campaign, the more it gives you sway when you go to other funders. So you demonstrate that level of commitment at the grassroots by getting lots of people giving a lot of money. That can be really useful when you're talking to the guy that's got lots to give.
That's really useful, thank you.
I've also got a question come from Maz Baker from the Prospects Trust, who says, when should a charity project transition to a community project?
Yeah, hi, sorry, I haven't got my screen on because I've got really bad broadband at home. So we're trying to do too many things from a little house in the Fens. So yeah, that's why I've joined today's meeting, really, because I work for a really established charity. I mean, it's over 30 years old. And we created a new social venture called Unwrapped in Ely. It is a refill larder, it's a green grocery, eco shop. It's got a little bit of everything, and it's got a huge amount of community support. We've just gone out with a little crowdfunder to raise some more money for the Canopy of Care project. So we're putting some outside. We've already done the outside seating with some crowdfunding, and now we want to put a cover over it. And I just said to our enterprise manager, there's no way in the world people are going to want to fund this at this time. And we're already halfway there in 2 weeks. So I'm completely overwhelmed by the community support we get. And I keep looking at ways where Unwrapped might go in the future. And it's whether, as a charity, we hold it back because our trustees are really focused on the main reason for the charity, which is to support people with additional needs. And historically, that's always been on our organic farm site. So this was a real brave step for us to sort of go and do something new. And it's been a massive success. But it does feel like there's community business at the heart of Unwrapped, as opposed to the trustee business, which is at the heart of Prospects Trust. So I'm going to you, who've already founded community businesses. Should we pivot? Should we consider letting go of the reins as a charity and letting it become a community enterprise in its own right? And what are the pros and cons of that?
So
Lots of questions, sorry.
You talked about converting a charity to a community business.
Absolutely, yeah.
You couldn't have the community business as a trading subsidiary of the charity, so you got the best of both worlds.
Well, that's what I wondered. I did wonder that.
And listening to you talking, I also wondered whether offering a membership of the charity could be, I think charities have members, can't they? Or a membership scheme, could that be a halfway house that would suit both agendas?
Yeah, I think you're right, Robert. I think that we don't want to affect the charity. The charity runs fine and it's got its clear mission and it knows what it's doing. But there's this little, I'm going to say a beast. It's a beast of Unwrap, this new venture underneath. And it seems to sometimes take away all the attention of running a charity. I think maybe that halfway house, I think we do need to look at our structure and have it as almost a trading arm underneath the charity, which is a lot braver. Again, I think maybe I need to pick your brains, Robert, and see, obviously.
Yeah, I was about to say, Maz, we've got a consultant also who can just take you through the legal structures, and it's a very common thing for a charity to set up a trading arm because it's got this really powerful thing that's got to launch and it's got completely different personality. It's a very common thing. So I'm sure a mixture of different wisdom will help for you.
Super.
Any other questions? Or Alex and Robert, did you want to ask us each other anything particular about sharing each other's views? So
a question for Alex. I don't think you talked about the tax relief on investment for shareholding, community share issues. Did yours qualify for SITR?
That's a good point, actually. So yes, we did. We did do the advanced assurance for social investment tax relief, and I think if anybody's considering raising money for a community business, it's a real I think it's a real asset to be aware of and to leverage for your prospective investors. So in short, what it does is that it would enable a UK-based taxpayer to reclaim 30% of their investment from HMRC in their sort of tax returns. So if you invested £1,000, you could claim £300 back at the end of the tax year. And I think whilst most of the investors are going to be motivated by the cause rather than a financial return in a lot of these community business examples, I think it's really helpful to to be able to make the most out of what is out there. So I think that the fact that you can get 30% of your investment back in year one is something that's still quite compelling, and it might persuade people to invest slightly more because that's an extra consideration. So yeah, we did try and market social investment tax relief as one of the extra advantages of supporting this one. So yeah, definitely worth looking into, and I know people at Plunkett can help with the registration process.
If I can ask a second question, Alex, same. So things I've been involved with have really got huge debate about the incentives for this share offer, the different levels of investment and different incentives. So I guess at the shop it was a coffee and a bit of cake, or 2 pieces of cake, or a party, and there's that balance between offering people incentives that have value to them and offering that recognition, so having your name on the wall. How did you play that one?
Yeah, so there's a big, you can have that fairly vanilla investment, which we went for, and you can have the kind of the Kickstarter where it's entirely reward based, and then you can have something in between, can't you? And I guess we're still slightly open from the point of view that because we don't open for a while, it's slightly in our gift to what we do. We haven't committed to anything, and I think we probably held back a few kind of options to see if we needed to leverage them, but we're really fortunate, and I'm really grateful that the case to invest on its own merit was sufficient. I think it would be nice to do some sort of recognition on a plaque or similar, and I think we'll probably do what we've done along the way and kind of consult and feel what our our society members kind of think is appropriate. Yeah, we'll try and do something fitting, but we actually didn't sign up to giving anything giving anything away. So we'll look at it again. What about you?
No, there was talk of that there ends up with a fairly bland list of incentives, and we talked about names on the wall and things like that, and that didn't really happen. If I'm honest, the crowdfunding campaign was a bit of a damp squib. It sort of didn't go as well as it could have done, and we were saved by grants.
I'm gonna, if you don't mind me saying that, because as a charity, we've done a bit of both. We've done grants and crowdfunding, and actually, what I would say is we did incentivise the crowdfunding element, but actually people didn't take that up, and the rise of the anonymous donor has absolutely heartened me in these times. I'd say the majority of people that are pledging for our current live project, they're just anonymously donating, and so actually say that they could have their name on a plaque hasn't actually turned into why they're doing it. So
I completely agree. It is really heartening, and I think we were maybe fortunate to tap into that wave of goodwill in recent months, where I think people hopefully see this one as something that will be part of a brighter 2021, and people did invest generously, and we're incredibly grateful for that. Robert, I had a question for you. In terms of the walled garden shop, to what extent do you market and leverage the fact that you're a community business, or do you just focus on doing really good coffee and really good cake and letting that be the foundation of your success, and the fact that you've got some social impact as a byproduct, or do you try and leverage the community angle that underpins the business and the story that sits behind it?
So the social impact, in particular work experience for the guys in the Broadland Clinic, was very much the it was very firmly nailed to the mast when we went chasing after grants and funders. But I think to make a big deal of it within the community would be wrong. It has to be quite low key. They just happen to be there. 3 of the guys in the clinic have applied already for work experience there, and people won't know they're there. They'll just be volunteers like anybody else. I think you talk about coffee and cake, and for me, I always kind of visualise it as being, well, I would imagine sitting in the little garden outside the cafe with a coffee and cake. I think coffee and cake makes the world go round in so many ways. And it's also much more profitable than selling baked beans and cigarettes. So then is it a community business? I think people know it's locally owned, they know it's locally run, they know it's their shop and therefore they support it. But for I guess people who are driving up to drop their kids at school and stopping on the way back for a coffee or going there up before they pick the kids up, they really don't care. I think so. They're buying stock from a cash cow like everybody else would do, but they're also using local stuff as well and trying to get that mix of local suppliers and supporting local suppliers as well as buying the stuff people expect to find in the shop. So it has to work as a shop and a cafe first, and a community business second. People won't make concessions if it's because it's a community business.
I guess that picks up on what I think both of you said early on, was that it has to be, at the end of it, has to be a business of what the community want, isn't it? And that's what's got to ultimately drive it all the way along.
Yeah. When you walk in the shop, and the first thing you see is the wall of wine.
That sounds good. And we've got another question from Rhiannon, please.
So I was thinking, in terms of steering group, one of the things that I hadn't anticipated when you start to speak to people about your project, about the impact that you envision having and gaining feedback, is that it can be quite emotional for people because you've spotted an area where needs aren't being met, and the idea that something could even exist for people can bring relief, or it can bring emotion. And some of the stories are quite compelling. So I don't really know where I'm going with this in terms of a question, but that's something I hadn't really anticipated. Do you have experience in that, and how that's like, not appropriate to contain it because we're humans and we don't want to contain that, but if people are being brave enough to share the deepest parts of themselves in order for an organization to grow, that's really profound. And also there's a bit of pressure as well, because you then really realize this is needed, but it's needed right now. And in terms of project, it can take time to get that set up, in terms of having investors, in terms of being ready as well yourself if you're founding an organization. So I guess I'm looking for, it could go in either direction, whether it's about the courage to keep going, or how do you contain, I don't like the word contain, but does any of that make sense, what I'm trying to come to convey?
I think you're talking about storytelling. I think storytelling is storytelling. So we did a community survey at Little Plumstead, and Alex, we've done the same thing at Gressenhall, and you'll end up with charts that say how many people will use the place and how many people will use it, how often will they use it, and what their ages and whether they work or they don't work, and all that sort of stuff. All the stuff you wave at statutory funders to demonstrate getting their support. But what wins over the people that support you on the ground are the stories of what it used to be like or what it could be like. So the more you can tell stories, and so when you write these proposals that tick all the boxes and have all the right numbers, it's that little highlighted, John said, the blah, 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 or Francis would like to do this, or we know. It's the personal stories that make all the difference and bring it to life for everybody, however hard-nosed they might claim to be.
And I guess that then gives value to what people have shared with you as well, if there's
concern.
Thank you.
And also when a project's running, keep collecting those stories, and tell those stories, keep reinforcing that that soft impact that the project has.
Thank you.
I've got a quick question. Are either of your projects doing a kind of formal recording of the social impact? I'll explain why, because I'm going to do a shameless plug now, because later this week we've got a webinar measuring how you make a difference, and because C are launching a toolbox that organisations can work with their team to actually start measuring the social impacts and the building blocks of then demonstrating this. So I'm just wondering, have your project started any of this yet, and what are you using?
So let me go first on that. So I had this rather audacious idea, which I've sowed as a seed with several people at the Mental Health Trust that run the Broadland Clinic, that a partnership between a mental health trust and a community to create a shop that provides work experience and improves the transition from basically being incarcerated to being released back into the community. I said it'd be a really interesting PhD study for somebody to track these guys as the ones that have work experience and the ones that don't, and see the impact on reoffending rates, the impact on their shortening their stay in secure accommodation. And so I would hope that something like that could generate some really hard data that would show that a statutory organisation like the Mental Health Trust investing in a community project delivers a return on investment, which is probably nothing like the sort of social impact assessment you'd be advocating as Social Enterprises of England, but I just think it could work really well there.
I think people get a bit like worried about all these different tools out there, and I know the toolbox that C are launching is very much just getting you started in how you measure, how you take those first steps, how you build it up, and what it could lead to. So it's not trying to be quite open, because I think people get a bit worried about, yes, I know there's a good impact, but how on earth do I start recording this? And it all sounds too complicated and scary.
I think it's far too easy to have a spreadsheet that says if you do this, it's worth that.
Yeah.
So if 10 people do this, it's worth 10 times that. And if 9 people do something else, it's worth that. And then you end up with a spreadsheet that says the social impact of my project is £3.6 million, but nobody believes it.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of focus sometimes on, they want to get to that number at the end and forget all the kind of the good work and the recording that goes way before you even get to that point. Yeah.
What about you, Alex?
So we've got an ambitious community benefit plan. I think we've got a some qualitative and some quantitative ways in which we hope we would evidence some of the improved kind of social outcomes that we would have as a result of some of the programs we're delivering at the pub. We're not trading yet, but we've got a structure, and we've got an obligation not only to ourselves to try and record and understand our social impact, but we've also got an obligation to Plunket as our grant funders. So we haven't yet got the lived experience of the kind of practicalities, but I definitely understand from my social investment days the kind of the nuance about what you can measure, and if you can measure it, what it means, because there are some things that go so much deeper. If you make one person feel more socially engaged and less lonely, what's that worth? You can't readily measure that, but you can say if 10 people came to an evening class. So some things are more difficult and some are easier than others, but I think there's definitely value in trying to measure and learn. And I think the thought process of at least trying to follow a template gives you a little bit of discipline. And then I think later down the line there's and kind of your experience reflects that you can start looking at wider ways of kind of measuring it further down the line when you know a little bit more about what the limitations are of some of the more basic parts.
Yep, very true. And we had a question from Wayne. Wayne asked, does the measure of social impacts have to be monetary or a number? So I think Wayne just been saying that no, it doesn't. It's all recording of the impact, I think, is equally as valuable. I mean, obviously the dream is to get, some hard figures, but you can't lose those soft you know, soft skills, those soft stories that have, I think, have far more impact personally.
And they have value too.
Yeah.
I think, if you don't mind me saying, Robert, I have a share of coffee and cake like you, and I found that as the person that does the bid writing and the quarterly reporting on any of the funds that we've got in for our project, sometimes just going and having a cup of tea and a bit of cake with the staff and the beneficiaries is a really good way. And so if I said to them, oh, while you're busy baking cakes, clearing you know, doing orders, can you also write down in this spreadsheet how many customers you've served today and whether they, on a scale of 1 to 10, whether they enjoyed their experience? It's never going to happen. They're too busy. But if I go and spend that time while they're packing orders and just go, tell me about some of the customers you've met today, I then capture that as a storytelling exercise, because they know about Carol, who comes in and buys 1 carrot and a slice of cake, and how that's her only, in lockdown, her only community contact. And you can't put a value on that, can you? But it does mean that when Carol doesn't turn up the next week, that someone in the shop is going to put a call out, because, you know, Carol's always there on a Tuesday buying a carrot and a piece of cake. So I think those stories, but how to capture those stories with the frontline people is often a cup of coffee and a chat with the staff team, because they really know about those people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also, I think it was Alex saying about the communication side. I mean, I'm a marketing person, so I naturally think like that. But I think catching those sort of examples, even if it's just sharing, you know, an anecdote on Facebook or whatever, yes, you might think you're not doing this hard and fast measuring your impact, but you're already documenting it and you can refer back to it in the future, and you're building your community, you're building your presence, and people are understanding what a good value you're delivering. Any other questions? We're coming up to 11, so any other questions? No? Anything, Robert, Alex, you wanted to say anything else?
I guess my kind of final thought would be, I've never claimed to be an expert at any of this stuff. I've just developed a knack for asking really direct questions of the right people, and sometimes the wrong people. So I think it's, when you set I had to do this stuff, it's more about trying to guess what the answers are. It's just about asking lots of questions and not taking no for an answer.
That's a good motto. Alex, final thoughts?
I definitely agree with that. I agree with that last sentence so much. Not taking no for an answer. You know, we've been super persistent over kind of like the last couple of years, and yeah, I think if you really believe, you can kind of make it happen. And I think we're just trying to live that through ourselves. So yeah, thank you so much, Jane, for putting on today, and it's been really nice to speak with everyone.
Yeah,
that's right. Well, a very, very, you know, big thank you to Alex and Robert for giving up your time today.